I move to Ministers to the question for our questions to the Minister for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, and I call Andy Allen.
Between 2019 and 2023, there have been 55 confirmed water pollution incidents in the East Belfast constituency. 2 instances were assessed to have a medium severity environmental impact. The other 53 were assessed as having a low severity environmental impact. The 2 medium severity incidents related to an eye water incident in 2019 and an agriculture incident in 2020. NEA issued a warning letter and claimed cost recovery in relation to the NI water incident, and a breach of cross-compliance regulations was progressed in relation to the agricultural incident. In respect to the 53 low-severity incidents, formal enforcement action is not normally considered. However, NEA will work with the polluter where identified to ensure the pollution is stopped and that action is taken to minimise the risk of reoccurrence. Of the 53 low-severity incidents, 10 had a domestic source, 15 an industrial source, 6 were related to NI water assets, and 1 was of an agricultural source. 21 low-severity incidents had a source classified as other, which may include pollution from oil spills, suspended solids from construction sites, paint washings or other miscellaneous sources.
I call Andy Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Minister for his assessment of the current enforcement powers and how effective he feels they are?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The key challenge within my department is not so much in relation to the powers, it's within the resources to carry out investigations and to pursue prosecutions around that. And that's why I've reallocated some resources within my department in terms of NEA, in terms of their regulation and enforcement powers. Also, one of the issues arising is in terms of fines and penalties around environmental crime, and that's why we're taking forward with the Department of Justice a review of the sentencing framework in terms of environmental crime, and I think it's absolutely fundamental that we do that. Lastly, what I would emphasise to all members and the general public is if they're aware of environmental crime or pollution, to report it urgently to the Northern Ireland Environment Agency's pollution hotline.
Anyone else?
Can you give us on the pollution reported at the Loop River in East Belfast earlier this year?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The NEA received a report of pollution in the Loop River on the 31st of May 2024. The incident was classified as having a medium severity environmental impact. NEA water quality inspectors carried out an examination of the drainage system in the area with a view to identifying the source of the pollution. The covered nature of the drainage system curtailed the inspector's ability to definitively identify the source of a pollutant discharge to enable formal enforcement action to be taken. As part of the investigation, however, inspectors have worked proactively with the local company within the catchment, who have since introduced improvements in their working practices. Continuing monitoring of the waterway has shown that pollution discharge has now abated.
Trevor Clark.
Minister, for his answers thus far. Minister, you'll accept that many of us here, the polluter pays, and I think that's a good mantra to come out with in terms of the polluter. But of course that doesn't seem to extend to NI Water whenever they infringe the regulations. Indeed, in your own answer, you cited into Andy Allen there about 6 of those cases was NI Water. At what stage is your department and government going to get serious whenever it's a government department that's actually causing the pollution?
Minister.
Thank the member for his question. He touches upon an important issue, which is in terms of the situation with regards to the NI water and how we regulate those from my department and from Northern Ireland Environment Agency. The key underpinning policy around that is SORPI, Statement of Regulatory Principles and Intent. I've on the record of saying that's not fit for purpose. We need to call time on that. I've asked officials to review that, and that review will be concluded by the end of the year. And I think that's an important step towards dealing with these issues in terms of pollution from NI water.
Minister.
I have previously made my desire to strengthen environmental governance within Northern Ireland and the importance of that, and I am fully committed to working on this. Officials previously provided me with an initial scoping paper which outlined current environmental governance arrangements and some options for strengthening it. This was an internal exercise for my consideration as part of policy development and was not for publication. Officials are continuing to progress work on ways to strengthen environmental governance, and I will provide a further update to the Assembly in due course. Any firm and final proposals to strengthen environmental governance will need to be brought forward to the Executive for consideration.
Mr Malone.
Thanks very much, Minister. And could I ask you, given that the announcement of the scoping exercise coincided with an SDLP motion calling for the establishment of an independent environmental protection agency, which the Assembly supported. Have you, Minister, scoped the support of your Executive College for such an independent agency?
Minister.
So I've started work in terms of strengthening environmental governance upon taking up office, and I asked officials to do that scoping study within the first few weeks of taking it up. The next step here is to look at what an independent environmental protection agency would look like, what its powers would be, and how it could actually improve the environment in Northern Ireland. And I'll be announcing next steps in the next number of weeks. As part of that, there will be a call for evidence to get different views on that, and I'll be engaging with my executive colleagues as part of that process, recognising that any legislation or any proposals to set up an independent environmental protection agency will require executive approval. So I will engage with the executive as part of that.
Robinson.
And thank the Minister for his questions, or for his answers. Could I ask the Minister if he could provide an assessment of the role of the Office of Environmental Protection?
Minister.
So the Office of Environmental Protection was set up as a result of us leaving the European Union, and it has a significant role and an important role, and I do value that. There's been a number of reports recently published, and they're obviously in the discourse, they've been in this chamber, but also in terms of the media. The issue is that that is one part of environmental governance landscape that has emerged post the EU exit, and we still don't have an independent environmental protection agency in Northern Ireland, and that's something we want to consider. But I value the Office of Environmental Protection, and I believe it's doing a good job.
John Blair.
Speaker, can I ask the Minister what contribution he believes an independent environmental protection agency could make to help environmental protection in general, as well as in the context of initiatives and plans he has already announced, such as the Lough Neagh plan?
Thank you, Mr Blair. I am keen to bring forward proposals to set up an independent EPA for consideration by the Executive. I want to explore models that would deliver improved and more independent environmental governance. Much has been said in the past by various individuals and groups about the lack of separation between DAERA and NEA's policy and regulatory roles, and the need for some degree of independence. It has been said that an independent environmental protection agency could deliver this and more, including improved public confidence in our governance arrangements and a reduction in environmental degradation. I do understand the concerns being raised around current arrangements and do see value in an independent environmental protection agency, and I also recognise the commitment in New Decade, New Approach. And I've made clear in the past my commitment to this, but we need to work this through to ensure we fully understand the issues and potential solutions to them. This is in a complex area and needs to be fully scoped out in terms of the changing environmental landscape in Northern Ireland.
Colin Gildernew.
Number 3, please.
Minister.
The Environmental Improvement Plan was published on the 27th of September this year and is therefore too early to identify improvements in air quality when compared to targets and actions included in the plan. However, the Air Pollution in Northern Ireland 2023 report was published on the 3rd of October 2024 and demonstrates that legislative limit values, target values and air quality strategy objectives have been met for the majority of pollutants monitored in Northern Ireland in 2023. Further information and data from air quality monitoring stations is available on Air Quality NI website via the link which is airqualityni.co.uk.
Mr Gildernew.
Thank you, John Corlea. Minister, you know that I have engaged with you around significant issues in my constituency in the Granville and Killishall areas. A recent serious issue once again in Granville after hours, during which time no residents nor I could get any contact or communication about that, what was happening. So can I ask what additional resource you provided to NIA to allow them the capacity to deal with ongoing issues that plague my community in Granville and Killishall?
Minister.
So I am aware of the issues and I'm happy to respond to those. I would say there is resource pressures within my department around Northern Ireland Environment Agency and more generally in terms of environmental protection, and that's something I'll be seeking to address in terms of the budget for next year, because we need to support our environment alongside also farming, which we'll talk about no doubt today. The NEA continues to receive reports of odour relating to Granville Industrial Estate, particularly with respect of the Granville Eco Park, which is an anaerobic digestion plant. I'm aware of concerns from local residents, and my inspectors within NEA continue to work with the company and other permitted sites in the Granville Industrial Estate to see improvements in the control of potentially odorous emissions. My inspectors will continue to regulate the permitted installations in the Granville Industrial Estate to ensure permit conditions are complied with, and will take appropriate enforcement action in line with their enforcement policy where necessary. Granville Eco Park Limited is working towards complying with an enforcement notice that NEA issued to the company on the 7th of March this year in relation to odours.
Justin McNulty.
Cordial, I thank the Minister for his answers thus far. Are the actions in the Environmental Improvement Plan sufficient to reduce the number of deaths caused by poor air quality in the north? And for context, these were recently estimated at 900 deaths per year.
I'm very conscious of those figures that you quoted, because there are individual lives that are being lost as a result of poor air quality in Northern Ireland. I will do whatever I can in my power, whether it's through the Environmental Improvement Plan or the Future Air Quality Strategy in Northern Ireland, to reduce those deaths and to improve air quality. But this does require a cross-departmental approach, because there's more than just my department that can contribute to this, and that's why I'm working with other executive departments in terms of the actions we can take to improve air quality.
Andrew Muir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister. Could I ask the Minister when the consultation on the Clean Air Strategy will be published?
Minister.
I thank the member for his question. I've set the policy direction for the strategy with my officials, and they are now progressing it. Some actions will be the responsibility of other departments, as I've outlined, and I will work with my ministerial colleagues to finalise this important cross-cutting strategy. It is my intention to publish the strategy for consultation as soon as possible. The pace of work may be impacted by competing resource pressures, but it's a priority. I've met with officials and we're seeking to progress it.
Alan Chambers.
Speaker.
Sir.
The high levels of nutrient and bacterial pollution in Belfast Lough have an impact on the marine life, particularly in the area inward of the line between Carrickfergus and Grey Point, known as the Inner Lough and Harbour. Within the inner regions of the loch, the marine life shows signs of pollution pressures. Shellfish grow well in this nutrient-rich area, but require cleansing before human consumption. Seaweeds and other plant life are at moderate status in the harbour area, improving to high status in the outer loch, with Ballymaccormack Point being the most biologically diverse sites in Northern Ireland. The sediment-dwelling organisms tend to be more resilient to nutrient pollution and are at good to high status, again improving as the distance from Belfast increases. Belfast Lough is a special protected area for a range of bird species, supporting greater than 10,000 birds during the winter months. Seabird populations in the UK overall are not in good status, and this is reflected in species like redshank and great crested grebe in Belfast Lough. However, other species like the bar-tailed godwit are in favourable condition and are stable favourable trends for breeding terns. A decline in seabird populations is likely to be due to a range of factors.
Mr. Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Minister, scientists are providing evidence that the area of dangerously polluted water in Belfast Lough is expanding. It's having an adverse impact on water sports, bathing and on mussel production, with the annual tonnage of that down. Would the Minister agree with the assertion of a whistleblower to me who said that Belfast Lough has the potential to become the new Lough Neagh in the next 10 years?
Minister.
I'm very aware of the recent Northern Ireland Water Report, which is entitled The Story of Belfast Lough, and it paints a very concerning picture for all of us in terms of something which was within our constituency, but also for Northern Ireland. I have reflected upon this issue. I have read the report, and it is my strong view that if investment is not made quickly in wastewater infrastructure affecting Belfast Lough, I sadly feel that we're on course to Belfast Lough becoming our next Lough Neagh in terms of serious and substantial water quality breakdown.
Stephen Dunn.
Speaker, and thank the Minister for his answers. Can the Minister outline to me what action your department is taking to improve the water quality in Belfast Lough, specifically for sea swimming, which, as the Minister knows, is very popular right across the North Down area, just to improve that water quality beyond satisfactory as it is, and maybe more in terms of testing and so on?
Minister.
Thank you.
So the role for my department is around the water quality testing. You just referenced that in terms of bathing water quality, and the recent report was outlined in relation to that. In terms of the pollution of our waterways, we have a number of contributing factors in Belfast Lough. It's largely in relation to wastewater infrastructure. That's something I continue to work with the Minister for Infrastructure on. I will continue to support his bids for funding in terms of any water, because we need to invest in that infrastructure so we can reduce the pollution around that. particularly in relation to my constituency in Ballyhome, for example. There's a piece of work being undertaken in conjunction with both my department, including AFBI, and also NI Water, to do some research in terms of what the contributing factors are. They possibly are in relation to agriculture, and there's a number of actions we're taking as a department to improve the water quality in Northern Ireland and reduce the impact from agriculture, and that will also be laid out very shortly in terms of our nutrients action programme and the consultation we're going to undertake in that regard, because that's a key measure to improve water quality.
Conn Egan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Minister. Could you please outline for us how much of a contribution wastewater infrastructure is having in relation to poor water quality in Belfast Lough?
So the issue in terms of wastewater infrastructure and the impact that it has upon our waterways more generally in Northern Ireland is about 24%. Obviously that will vary in different areas, but in terms of Belfast Lough it's quite substantial. We know there's a need for investment in the Kinnaker wastewater treatment works in Hollywood, and that's a specific impact in terms of Belfast Lough, and it's critical that we invest in wastewater infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, Minister, there's a disconnect here between the seriousness of what's happening at Belfast Lough and the fact that you yourself have said it could be or will be the next Lough Neagh in terms of ecological breakdown, and the urgency or lack of urgency from the executive. And lots of people are concerned that the Lough Neagh action plan is more of an inaction plan. I acknowledge this is about wastewater investment. What are you specifically doing in terms of working with the Infrastructure Minister and others to make sure that this is dealt with expeditiously and it isn't simply about monitoring long-term plans and waffle, with the greatest of respect?
Minister.
So there's a number of questions from the Leader of Opposition there. One's in relation to Lough Neagh and the other one's in relation to working with the Minister of Infrastructure in regards to wastewater infrastructure. I entirely refute the allegation that this is a Lough Neagh inaction plan. You'll know that there's many actions we're delivering from that, and they're coming out on a regular basis. And that is welcome from the work that's been done by my officials, but also working in conjunction with others, particularly within the agricultural community. And we're very much focused upon delivering that action plan, as we've been doing over the last number of weeks and months. In terms of working with the Minister of Infrastructure, I have a strong working relationship with him. This was recently discussed in terms of the need to invest in wastewater infrastructure at our last executive meeting, and it was agreed that we would have a specific discussion at a future executive meeting around this. There is additional capital funding which has been allocated as a result of the budget, which was announced last Wednesday, and it's for us as an executive to make decisions in terms of how to spend that, but it would be my strong desire to ensure that we prioritise wastewater infrastructure for capital investment.
Andrew Muir.
Sure.
As this House will be aware, following the Autumn Budget 2024 announcement last Wednesday, funding for agriculture, agri-environment and the wider rural economy will no longer be a ring-fenced addition to the Northern Ireland Block Grant. In addition, instead, future funding for agriculture and fisheries will now be considered as part of the Executive's budget for 2025-2026. My officials are still working through the detail, but I will be doing all I can to ensure that the agri-food sector continues to be supported. I am confident that all parties in the Executive are fully supported and care deeply about supporting our economically and socially significant agri-food sector. Moving forward, this funding will be essential in delivering my priorities of tackling climate change, protecting the natural environment and supporting a sustainable, resilient and productive agri-food sector.
Ms Murphy.
I'd like to thank the Minister for his answer. Minister, given the vital role that rural development plays within our communities, why does rural affairs sit as the sixth ministerial priority within your 24-25 business plan?
Minister.
So rural affairs is a priority for me, and that's something I've been spending time on. And I have a number of ministerial priorities, and one of them which includes rural affairs. That's something that we are progressing in terms of developing a new rural policy, and that's something we'll seek to be consulting about that in due course. I'm also doing efforts to see how we can restore funding for rural development. This was lost as a result of leaving the EU, and it's something I want to see how we can restore that. And that was discussions I was with the Finance Minister on Thursday in relation to that. It's absolutely vital that we support rural communities and we reflect the needs of them today. I also want to speak a bit more in terms of the budget. The decision that was made for this funding for farming and fisheries no longer to be earmarked, and for that just to come as part of our block grant to Northern Ireland is a concern for me. I wish to see that funding alongside rural development to be ring-fenced for Northern Ireland, because we need to protect those communities, and that's something I will be working with my executive colleagues on to secure that. This funding was earmarked up until the end of March of next year, and it's important that we provide certainty going forward, and that's something I'm quite keen to do.
Jill McElveen.
thus far. Can I ask the Minister if he'll be joining with the UFU and the NFU at the rally in Westminster on the 19th of November to show solidarity with our farmers?
I'll check my diary in relation to this, but I want to comment a wee bit in terms of the issue you've raised, which is in terms of the inheritance tax and agricultural property relief. This was a bad budget for farmers, and one of the biggest issues around this is that decision in terms of agricultural property relief. Northern Ireland will be disproportionately affected as a result of that, and I'm meeting the Secretary of State today and will be raising the issue with him and asking for a rethink in relation to this. We need to provide succession planning for farming in Northern Ireland so we can encourage the young people into farming, but also ensure the future success of family farms in Northern Ireland. And this move in terms of inheritance tax has severe impacts in terms of inhibiting that generational renewal, and is actually causing quite a lot of angst and concern within the farming community of Northern Ireland today.
Colin McGrath.
Given the recent announcement about the funding no longer being ring-fenced, is the Minister concerned that there will now be a competitive edge for farming in the south, and what might you be able to do to try and address that?
Minister.
So there already is a disparity in terms of agriculture north and south, in terms of the budget settlements and the investment that is being made. Some of this is frankly the outworkings of Brexit, where Northern Ireland is no longer part of the European Union, where down in the Republic of Ireland the Common Agricultural Policy still applies and there is funding set aside for this. I can't resolve that. But what I can do is make a case for Northern Ireland to my executive colleagues and also to the UK Government. I also am in strong engagement with ministers in the South around the issues that they're facing and how we can replicate some of the issues that they're doing. So we've had good discussions in terms of sheep support and the scheme that they've been rolling out in the South and how we can try to replicate that in the North. I'll do all I can as Minister to support the farming community in Northern Ireland within the resources I have.
Sir.
For Lough Neagh, like many water bodies across the globe, the primary environmental problem which leads to the growth of blue-green algae is excessive enrichment of waters with nutrients, specifically phosphorus and nitrogen. We know that the main contributing factors of this enrichment are agriculture and wastewater for both treatment works and septic tanks. The REFOS project, led by AFBI Institute, was completed in 2020 and attributed to sources of excess phosphorus entering the water environment in Northern Ireland as 62% from agriculture, 24% from wastewater treatment works and 12% from septic tanks. Provisional Lough Neagh Pacific data, which AFBI prepared for the Lough Neagh report, indicates a similar pattern, estimating that 56% of the total phosphorus load reaching the loch is from the agricultural sector, 31% from wastewater treatment works, 1% from septic tanks and 12% from other diffuse pollution, which is forestry and urban. However, these figures have not yet been finalised and further work is underway to do that, with outputs expected for release in January 2025. My department's Chief Scientific Advisor's Office is working with senior science representatives from AFBI, DAERA's Environment, Fisheries and Marine Group, the Northern Ireland Environment Agency, Northern Ireland Water, Queen's University and Ulster University to oversee a joined-up programme of further scientific work for Lough Neagh. This includes the development of a Lough Neagh science platform and the development and validation of models to apportion nutrient loadings from agriculture and non-agricultural sources at river catchment and sub-catchment level. Further information on source apportionment and the caveats associated with the estimates for the contribution by different sectors to nutrient pollution is contained in Annex B of the Lough Neagh Report and Action Plan.
Thank
you very much, Mr. Speaker. Minister, isn't it a farce that many inside this House and outside continue to point the finger at our main industry, when the truth is, and you've just outlined it today, a significant part of the problem is coming from Stormont departments? Does Stormont not need to get its own house in order before lambasting and blaming the agricultural sector?
Sure.
So I've been repeatedly on the record that I'm not involved in blame games. That's not where you're going to find me in relation to that. And I also don't believe in some of the language that's been used in recent months around this, because we need to work together to address these issues. We do need to invest in wastewater infrastructure, but we also need to take a better approach to enforcement around environmental crime, and that's why, working with the Department of Justice, we're going to be reviewing the fines and penalties around environmental crime, because we need to provide sufficient deterrent around that. We also need to have sufficient resources, and that's what's key around my budget for next year, so that we can do the regulation, investigation and enforcement activities associated with this. I'm clearly of a view that any polluter in Northern Ireland should be treated the same, and that's why I'm reviewing the Statement of Regulatory Principles and Intent associated with Northern Ireland Water, because I think it's absolutely key that we do do that, and we treat everyone fairly in Northern Ireland around these issues, and that's something you're not going to find me wanting on. We do need to invest in wastewater infrastructure, and that's why I continue to support John O'Dowd in his bids for funding around that. You might find it strange that one minister is calling for another minister's department's budget to be increased, but that's the kind of person I am.
Declan McAleer.
Concordia. Minister, you recently introduced a number of small business research initiatives. In what ways do you believe that they could, in some ways, help address the issues at Loughney?
So we have been doing a number of small business research initiatives. One's been taken forward by the UK Space Agency, quite significant level of interest in relation to that, and that's about monitoring blue-green algae. The other one's in terms of the being able to tackle and potentially reduce the blue-green algae blooms within Lough Neagh. We announced a number of suppliers around that most recently, and we will see how that works out over time ahead, because it is about research around that, and we're doing further launch of that tomorrow with First Minister and Deputy First Minister, hopefully. The other one's in terms of sustainable utilisation of slurry. This is something I'm quite strongly supportive of and very passionate about. This is about moving from viewing slurry as waste to being a resource. And we've been pointing a number of suppliers. It was up in Tobermore most recently, and it was also around in O'Donnell with Blacks and Houston around that. And this is about moving a situation where we can export the excess we have around this to other parts of the world, and we can also then generate electricity from this. I think that's a really, really positive thing, and I want to thank my officials for progressing these SBRI initiatives, because they're very, very positive.
Alan Hall.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you very much, Minister. We know that the loch is central to so many communities around it. How are you engaging with those local communities in an effort to tackle water quality issues affecting Lough Neagh?
Minister.
So the Northern Ireland Environment Agency and my department delivered 3 Lough Neagh outreach events in October 2024 around the Lough Shore to provide members of the public and other interested parties with information and guidance on blue-green algae. The events provided the opportunity for local stakeholders to see the ongoing work that has been delivered around the Lough Neagh catchment. DAERA and Northern Ireland Environment Agency will continue to work closely with local stakeholders, including the Lough Neagh Partnership, Rivers Trust and local angling clubs who are in the eyes and ears of our rivers and can pick up on issues and opportunities to improve water quality. A close working relationship with my department is of mutual benefit as we strive to improve water quality in Lough Neagh and in Northern Ireland. In addition, I am pleased to report that in the next few months I will be chairing the first quarterly Lough Neagh Stakeholder Forum. This forum will play a crucial role in progressing our next steps by enabling diverse, valuable input and communication pathway as the implementation of the action plan is progressed. I want to say in closing that I was at one of those events, which is in Glenavy, which I've referenced, and the turnout was fantastic, and it was really good to see different people working together around these issues.
Carl Hunter.
Minister, the presence of this algae devastated businesses within my constituency to the point of closure. They've yet to receive any compensation. Can I ask what enforcement action, if any, has been taken against the departments and agencies responsible for these pollutants?
Minister.
So, I'm happy to speak to the member after this in terms of the specifics of the issues around that, because we need to give you a detailed response around this. We do have an enforcement policy within the department, and key to that is for people to report those issues urgently to us. And one of the other issues is that we want to ensure that the fines and penalties are appropriate to that, and that's something we're reviewing.
John Buchanan. Minister.
My special advisor left her post on the 13th of August 2024. The member will appreciate it would not be appropriate to comment further on what is essentially a confidential HR process.
Minister. Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Minister, is it not unusual for a special advisor to only want 1 week's notice, or was her swift exit due to another position she may have been pursuing?
Minister.
This was not unusual.
Donny Donnelly.
Question 8, please.
A wide range of actions are being progressed. The Nutrients Action Programme is the key measure to control nutrient pollution from agricultural sources and improve water quality, and includes a wide range of measures on storage, spreading and management of slurry, manures and chemical fertilisers. The Nutrients Action Programme, or NAP, is currently being reviewed, and a public consultation and proposals for the updated NAP will be launched in early 2025. My department is also developing an ammonia strategy to deliver reductions in emissions in agriculture. I wish to seek additional views on the proposed mandatory ammonia reduction measures in the ammonia strategy, including the use of low-emission slurry spreading equipment, otherwise known as LESE, as part of the NAP consultation process. In October 2024, my department awarded contracts worth £4 million each to 2 companies in Northern Ireland as part of the Phase 2 of Sustainable Utilisation of Slurry Small Business Research Initiative. The project seeks, by the end of Year 3, to remove and export at least 1,000 tonnes of phosphorus per year from livestock manures that are applied on the land in Northern Ireland. The launch of the SULS Phase 2 delivers in Action 10 of the Loughney Action Plan.
Thank you. We now move to topical questions to the Minister. I call Patsy McGlone.
Minister, could I ask, just in light of the recent announcements around the inheritance tax and the implication of that inheritance tax for particularly family farms, could I ask if your department is taking specific advice around what those implications are likely to be for active family farm businesses?
Minister.
I thank the member for his question, and it's an important question, and this is what Question Time is about. It's about what affects people in Northern Ireland. And the limitation in terms of the £1 million on agricultural property relief does bring a considerable amount of Northern Ireland farmers into the scope of inheritance tax. It's impossible to precisely determine the number of farms affected, but around 1/3 would be a reasonable estimate from the data, and also much higher within the dairy sector at potentially 75%. Northern Ireland has some of the highest agricultural lands in the UK and Ireland. In 2023, the Irish Farmers Journal survey showed that agricultural land was selling in Northern Ireland at an average value of £13,794 per acre. This is a potential impact around Northern Ireland. It is going to have a significant impact in Northern Ireland, and I'm meeting the Secretary of State today, and I'll be asking for a rethink in relation to this. We will do all what we can within our department to enable and encourage succession planning, but this is causing real concern in Northern Ireland.
Mr. McGlone.
Thank you for that, Minister. What I was thinking more specifically was in terms of the professional advice that would be required, say, from the likes of accountancy practices and that, so that you are best armed when you go to meet the likes of the Secretary of State, or indeed the Chancellor, to make a case best to the Chancellor. Would you consider that as well, please? Because this has been raised, it's creating a lot of emotional turmoil among some farming families.
Minister.
So I have to focus on what the varies in my department is around this, but I have spoken to the President of the Ulster Farmers Union about this, and I think we need to work together in this matter. Obviously they'll commission their own research in relation to this, and I think that will be very valuable in terms of the case we can make in Northern Ireland, and let's hopefully together within this chamber and wider society we can make the case to the UK Government around this.
Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Minister as well. And in the same vein, in response to the member from Mid-Ulster, you talked about succession planning. Indeed, is that not another name for people getting rid of their farms? Because many of these farmers are not actually profitable, and the inheritance tax will mean that they're carving up their farms and they're not viable. So what can you explain more what you mean by succession planning, Minister?
So the department recently launched the Farm for Generations programme, which is whereabouts you proactively manage the succession of your farm. And unfortunately, there is instances where people pass away, and it's difficult then to pass the farm on for it to be successful in the future. We don't want that. We want to see family farms in Northern Ireland to be successful, and that's where we need to plan for the future. My department, as part of that programme, will be assisting people in relation to this. There's more we need to do, particularly in light of this very significant announcement from the UK Government to enable that. For example, inheritance tax is not paid if you pass it on, but you don't pass away within 7 years, and that's something that obviously will come into play if this decision continues to proceed, and that's something we will work with the farming community in terms of helping them the journey ahead. This is a significant issue. I'll do all I can within the department to assist people around this.
I hear what you say, Minister, and I think their first example is probably less of a case in terms of farmers not transferring their land in a timely manner. However, has any consideration been given? Even indeed your answer to the Mid-Ulster representative was 75%, which is actually higher than the estimate that Rachel Reeves used in Westminster last week. So can your department do more scoping out of the impact this will actually have? Because what we fear on this side of the chamber, and I'm sure others will fear the same, this is going to decimate farming in Northern Ireland. It's not a case of paying the inheritance tax, it's going to decimate the farms. There's not going to be farms in Northern Ireland. Or is this another way to get rid of the farmers?
Minister.
So my department's done some initial analysis in relation to this. You're probably aware, obviously, this announcement was on Wednesday and we're digging through the details in relation to this. The analysis we've done around that, I'm happy to place that in the library, and hopefully that will help people around this, because we're dealing with an evolving picture. You know the situation in terms of what the UK government are outlining in relation to this. We're working through the data around this and the different thresholds that are in place, and we'll do what we can to do that. I've engaged with the Finance Minister in terms of sharing the information that we have to aid her in this case, because obviously primarily this is a relationship between the Department of Finance and Treasury. I am very keen to see the success of family farms in Northern Ireland. They're a bedrock of our countryside. It's important that we support them. I'm on the side of farmers. I'm going to do whatever I can to support them through this. Our executive needs to come together with me in terms of ring fencing the future budget around farming, fisheries and rural development. That's one key measure that we can hopefully take a decision upon that shortly, which will give an element of reassurance. But these decisions in terms of inheritance tax and agricultural property relief are bad. This is a bad budget for farmers, and we need to do all we can together to try to address those concerns.
Sorry. Minister, I'm just in terms of the... I'm so sorry. Just in terms of the peatlands in Garran Park, in Garran, between East Antrim and North Antrim, could you give an update on the progress of that, please?
Minister.
No problem at all, Shan. So peatlands are quite important to me, and I was up recently at the Caffrey Hill Farm to see the work that was being done in relation to peatland restoration. But what more, rather than just doing the work at the Hill Farm, we're progressing a peatland strategy for Northern Ireland. And this peatland strategy will provide a framework to guide the conservation, restoration and management of semi-natural peatland habitat in Northern Ireland. Peatland restoration will play a key role in Northern Ireland meeting its net zero commitments, providing a nature-based solution to reduce carbon emissions, reduce carbon and also to support climate resilience. The publication of the peatland strategy will be subject to executive approval and is a priority for my department, and I'd be delighted to visit any peatland within your constituency and to see the good work that's occurring within North Antrim.
Apologies, Minister. I was genuinely so engrossed in what you were talking about in terms of our farmers and the issues that are coming up. I would love to invite you, Minister, and I'll be in touch with your department for a meeting with Garran Plateau, and I want to thank you for the work that's been done on the peatlands so far.
Minister.
I'm glad to accept that invite. In terms of farmers, I think it is important, because what we're talking about here is people's livelihoods, and it's causing real concern for people. And it's a concern for me, because this budget was like a bolt from the blue in terms of that decision, and then also then removing the earmarking of the funding. And clearly the UK government is doubling down on that. But we've got an issue in terms of farmers being the custodians of our countryside. I want to work with people, but if we don't have those farmers, we're not going to have those custodians of the countryside. And that's why I think all of us are collectively concerned around the issues around this, and hopefully we can work together. Because the ultimate success of this Assembly and this Executive is how we can work together.
Mr. Speaker, Minister, from ongoing correspondence I've had with you since taking up your post as Dear Minister, I've no doubt you will have familiarised yourself with the Roger Shannon case, a case which has saw a farm business in the past few years to date receive excess of £3 million based on an alleged fraudulent claim. Can you therefore advise why to date you or your department have not handed this case over of such magnitude and public interest to Deloitte for a full, thorough, independent investigation?
Minister.
I'm aware of the correspondence that the member has sent to me, but also to officials around this. I'd be reluctant to comment upon this within the Assembly. What I will give a commitment to do is I will review that correspondence again, but I believe the decisions that my department have taken to date on that are correct.
Mr. Buchanan.
Again, and Minister, James Corrigan, the Deputy Chief Inspector of Criminal Justice, advised that this case should be handed over to Deloitte. Why then has that advice been ignored, and why on 2 occasions since taking up office have you refused to meet me on this particular case?
Minister.
I've outlined in terms of that correspondence my response to this. I understand the member's concerns around it. What is a very historic case. I will personally review it again in response to your questions around this, and I will write back to the member further to that. But I have corresponded extensively with you on what is a specific case that I understand your concerns around it, but also they have to respect due process.
Andrew South.
Speaker and Minister, representing an area like South Down with large open spaces and rural areas, there's a huge demand to maximise the opportunities in planting trees. So I just wanted to ask around forestry grants and the administration of them. Where the season for tree planting is limited to November to March each year, the change in times of administration of these grants presents many challenges, with the current scheme only open in October and closing on the 11th of November. Would the Minister commit to reviewing the administration of these and the timeliness?
So I'm aware of this ongoing issue, and I'm meeting Lord Elliott, so the previous chair of the ERA committee is not going away, I'll be meeting him tomorrow in relation to these issues, because we do need to get the grants out on time. I'm concerned about the delays that occurred in the last financial year, and I'm quite keen that we get these out as soon as possible. And what I'll do is further to the meeting tomorrow and my engagement with officials in this matter, because it is a concern for me. We do need to get these grants out. I will update the member in regards to this, because it's important that we have that support out and we meet the planting season, and we also meet our afforestation targets in Northern Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer and his commitment on this. Due to the uncertainty that this causes within the industry, would you be committed to taking a review of whether a multi-year budget package for forestry grants is a way forward?
Minister.
Yes, this is something I talked recently with relevant organisations. And it's something I would wish to do. We need to obviously have a discussion with the Finance Minister around this, but a multi-annual budgeting around this would be absolutely fantastic, because it would allow us to plan for the future. And that's something that now you've raised it with me, you're giving me more strength in my argument.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Minister for an update on the third Northern Ireland Climate Change Adaptation Plan?
Sir.
So we are progressing the third climate adaptation plan, easy for me to say, engaging with executive colleagues on that. Alongside that, we're also looking to set our first carbon budgets and then also introduce our first climate action plan. These are absolutely critical interventions that we need to make for Northern Ireland. I engage regularly with businesses, and they're very clearly on the road to net zero. Had a very positive meeting with Belfast Harbour on Friday, and their commitments to tackling climate change and investment in terms of decarbonisation is there, and we as government need to match that ambition by so many in Northern Ireland.
Thank you, and I thank the Minister for his response. I agree that these are critical interventions. Can I ask how this action can be done in a just and fair way?
Minister.
So I am firmly committed to just transition. I made a bid via the Department of Finance to the UK Government for a Just Transition Fund for Agriculture, and that was not met last week as part of the budget, so I will be engaging with my executive colleagues in terms of that funding for next year. But whatever we do in terms of around climate change, we need to work with people, and we need to be able to deliver that in a fair and meaningful way. And that's about practical issues such as, for example, energy efficiency in the home. We need to be able to support people who are being pushed into fuel poverty and address that. We also need to do that in terms of agriculture, so that we support farming in its road towards net zero. It's absolutely key, and I'll be making further announcements about this next week.
Alan Robinson.
Can I ask the Minister for his assessment of the high volume of residents in Ballykelly who are being bitten by what has been described as mosquito bites?
Minister.
I am concerned around this. I know that my department has received correspondence and is considering this. I would, at the first instance, encourage people to consult their general practitioner and the health officials around this. Obviously, it's a public health issue around that. I know my department is looking at the issue, and I know the concerns around it.
Mr. Robinson.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, Minister, for your answer. Can you clarify if you've had any discussion with Northern Ireland Water, or your department has had any discussion with Northern Ireland Water, to ask if the reed bed installation in 2021-22 at Walworth and Ballykelly may in any way be contributing to the exacerbation of mosquitoes in the Ballykelly area?
Minister.
So I'm not personally aware of any discussions. I'm not saying that they haven't occurred, so what I'll do is make inquiries today, and we'll write back to you by the end of the week.
Stuart Dixon.
Mr. Speaker, Minister, can you give the House your assessment of the contribution of wastewater infrastructure to water quality issues in Northern Ireland?
Minister.
So the lack of investment in wastewater infrastructure in Northern Ireland has had a severe impact in terms of water quality. It's contributing to about 24% of the issues in Northern Ireland, and that's why we need to invest in those areas. The lack of investment in wastewater infrastructure is not just holding back house building and economic development, it's also damaging our environment, and that's why we need to collectively work together on how to address this issue.
Mr Dixon.
Thank you, Minister, for your answer. Minister, would you agree with me that the separation of grey and foul water is an important aspect in terms of developing that infrastructure?
Minister.
And the developments that are being taken forward by the Minister for Infrastructure in that respect.
Conor Egan.
Minister, could you please outline what steps you'll be taking to improve bathing water quality in Belfast Lough?
Minister.
So the steps I'm taking forward are multifaceted. One is in relation to working with the Minister for Infrastructure and wastewater infrastructure, which is a key issue from question time today. The other issue is in relation to river basin management plans. We're reviewing those in terms of the current ones and also taking into account the report from the Office of Environmental Protection. And the other issue is in terms of Nutrients Action Programme in terms of agriculture. So there's multiple areas that we're taking around this, but I'm reliant upon others to deliver the water quality for Northern Ireland, and I'll be focused upon regulation and enforcement for those who pollute our waterways.
Thank you. That brings to conclusion questions to the Minister for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs. We now move to the Minister for Communities, and I call Mark